Let's go into the second meditation. We now doubt everything. Thank you, Descartes. Second meditation is of the nature of the human mind, and that it is more easily known than the body. All right, now, he's going to make this very clear later on, but for him, this is the case. So just keep this in mind as we go through. All right. So we have this method of doubt, we doubt everything, and then he starts to go into this explanation of like, all right, look, it seems like you have a body, but you really don't. All right, because there's like, we're going to keep running into issues. Right, so he's, for instance, when he says is like, am I so dependent on body and senses that I cannot exist without these? That doesn't seem to be the case. So he says, well, what is a man? Shall I say a reasonable animal? Certainly not, for then I have to inquire what an animal is and what is reasonable. So that runs into issues. And then he's like, well, even our like bad understanding, we have a bad understanding of what a body is. So he gives like reasons for this, but it's very clear like what he's doing here, he's building an ontology. Okay. And an ontology, it's a metaphysical thing. It's a type of metaphysics. An ontology is just what exists. Okay. So his ontology as of, I mean, very early on, column 1, page 9, he establishes this, that he exists. Why? Well, that's pretty straightforward, right? In order for, so like, just to say like, you're right. The ideas I have in my head, they could have been implanted. But in order to deceive me, there has to be a me to deceive. That's basically all it is, right? Something can't happen to you unless you exist, right? But he's going to go on. He's going to go a little further. He exists as a thinking thing, which means you exist as a thinking thing, right? Because if you have a mind and you're being deceived, you exist, okay? That's all. And that's the big move of like establishing like things that we can believe. We can believe clearly and distinctly that we exist as a thinking thing, because in order to be deceived, okay, well, we have to exist. We exist as a thinking thing because the thing that's being deceived, right, that's an idea-based thing. That's an intellectual activity to be deceived. So that's how he makes this move from existing to as a thinking thing. And this right here, we have a question like, has he earned this, right? So he starts like, okay, in the Latin it's cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, and then he goes from that to I am a thinking thing. I'm a thinking thing, not a thing. We're a thinking thing. And the question is like, has he earned this step? A lot of contemporaries of his thought no. So, all right, what does it mean to be a thinking thing? Because he also kind of describes, what does it mean to think? All right, what does it mean? You say like, this is an intellectual thing. Okay, so you can have ideas. Okay, what are ideas? You can conceive. We'll talk about more about what ideas are in another meditation, but you can conceive, you can understand, you can know, and you can feel. Okay, and feeling here is not emotions, right? These are sensations. What he means here are, if you say like, I think I have the sensation of pain. What this amounts to is just like you have the idea that you are in pain. You see the color red, you have the idea that you see red. That's what he means by sensation here. He also talks a little bit about wax. He says, let's consider bodies, because he wants to say like, not only is it the case that we are thinking things and that this is what it means to be a thinking thing, he wants to go further and say, we can know this, that we are a thinking thing. We can know the mind as a substance, and a substance is just a immutable, which means unchangeable, entity with a particular nature. So a body, we'll find out, is a substance. God is a substance, and the mind is a substance. So if you hear banging in the background, it's just my dog. So he wants to establish that like we can know the mind more clearly than we can know the body, which matters because remember, being able to clearly and distinctly understand something is to know it. And he talks about wax, and he says, look, he says, let's consider a body. Let's talk about wax. Body for him, we'll find out, is just an extended thing. So the mind does not have extension in space, right? Bodies do. This is one of the distinctions between mind and body. Mind is a thinking thing. It's not extended in space, but it is, but bodies are. So, and by the way, this is a mode. Oh, sorry. This is a mode of the substance body. These are the modes of a thinking substance, and modes just mean like an attribute. It's a thing. It's a thing. It's a way that the substance does its job or its thing, right? So he says, let's think about this wax. Okay. It smells a particular way. It smells like the flowers that have been made into the beeswax. Then you burn it, and it no longer smells like that. So these properties that we're describing the wax as having aren't part of its essence. Not part of its essence. However, these things right here of the mind, that it thinks in particular ways, that it has particular attributes. All right, we know that, like we know the essence of the mind. And keep in mind, at one point we're going to know the origin of the mind as well, and of the body. But it's much easier to see like what the mind is doing, what its properties, its essential properties are. But we don't know that the body, right? Every property that we are going to assign to wax changes. We don't know its essence, and we can only have a particular sensation of it, right? So this is what he says, that at the end of this, like, you see the wax and you think, oh, it smells a particular way. So you say, I smell the wax. Is the same as I have an idea of the wax's smell. I'm gonna have to get onto my dog in just a second. Could you stop, please? Thank you. So I smell the wax is the same as I have the idea of the wax's smell. He's saying like we don't have this sort of direct contact that we need to have. So Descartes is also a rationalist. This distinction is sort of anachronistic in that they probably wouldn't have identified themselves this way during the time, but it's a good way to think about like the difference between somebody who thinks like we do have direct contact with reality versus like what Descartes' getting at, which is that we have particular ideas and we have a nature such that we can deduce information and knowledge from the ideas and nature that we have, right? So he's a rationalist. He thinks that, and we'll see this, that God has created us in such a way that we can begin to understand the world despite not being able to have this sort of direct contact with the world. So he even says at one point, this is page 12, column 1. For if I judge that the wax is or exists from the fact that I see it, it certainly follows much more clearly that I am, or that I exist myself from the fact that I see it. For it may be that what I see is not really wax. It may also be that I do not possess eyes with which to see anything. But it cannot be that when I see, or for when I no longer take account of this distinction, when I think I see, that I myself who think am not. So if I judge that the wax exists from the fact that I touch it, the same thing will follow to wit that I am. And if I judge that my imagination or some other cause, whatever it is, persuades me that wax exists, I shall still conclude the same. That is, that he exists as a thinking thing. And that's all that's going on in this section.